Virtual meeting session of the Annapolis City Council on Thursday, February 11th, 2021 will be called to order at 3:05. At this time, would everyone willing and able, please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty, justice for all.
I think the pledge should be like the invocation. One alder person ought to do it.
Okay.
Okay, Mr. City Attorney here.
He's having trouble getting on right now.
I think we could probably just go straight to the Planning and Zoning Department. Who's going to take the lead?
We can start if Julian, you can pull up the presentation.
Let me actually do that. I don't think he went his way.
Oh, sorry. Are you co-hosts? Oh, there we go.
Here we go.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll make sure to post this presentation on our website, which I've also just sent Julian the website address, but it's just planning and zoning and then comprehensive planning and then 2020 comprehensive plan. So you can see all of the documents that we've prepared for the comp plan over the last 2 years. There's a lot of information, including all of our economic reports. But today we're here based on feedback from our last presentation where there just wasn't enough time to get into all the details. So we want to spend some more time with you today, and we want to make sure that we hear from you and what you're thinking about, what you're worrying about, and what you're hearing from your constituents. We also want you to hear each other because we have to make sure all of our policy priorities are out on the table and identifying where there's points of conflict and where we all agree on things. So we're going to briefly go through what we've been doing for the past 2 years and what we talked about in our last presentation. And then we have some specific questions for you as we move through the presentation. So just to get us started, just to kind of refresh your memory of the role of the comprehensive plan. At its core, it is a land use plan, and it's supposed to establish a course of action for the next 30 or so years into the future. It has a lot of different components. It looks at things like transportation, water elements, sensitive areas, natural resources, recreation areas. And these components are all put together in one document, and it helps so that we can make sure we're conserving and protecting our natural resources, that we're growing in the way we want to grow, and that we have adequate areas for recreation, open space, infrastructure, public facilities. So these are all important parts of the plan. The way the plan gets implemented is primarily through the CIP and the zoning ordinance, but every agency in the city and even some agencies in the county or state play a role in helping us to implement our comprehensive plan. So next slide. Just want to make sure we set our expectations because comprehensive plan can't do everything. And in order for it to be successful, we have to make sure we know the answers to some very basic questions like, does the community want change? And if so, what kind of change? Is there local capacity to administer these changes? We might put a lot of lofty goals in the comp plan, but it's very possible we just can't implement those ourselves right at this time. What's the political will to adopt and enforce the proposed code changes? That's a huge part of implementing a comp plan. Plan has to be flexible, so we have to make sure we really moving forward in a way that the plan will be able to adjust at whatever the next few years throw at us. Economic recessions or global epidemics, the plan needs to be flexible enough to maybe not specifically name all those things, but to be able to react to those kinds of things. And then if we don't do anything, are we okay with that? If we have to say, if we do business as usual, if we're okay with business as usual, then we're going to get the usual results. So, that's just how it is. We leave the status quo in place. That's a choice too. And we'll just get what we have had in the past. So now I'm going to turn it over to Eric to do some recap of the past couple of years.
Can I ask a quick question though on that last point? Mm-hmm. Because I have to say, but what that says to me is that what we've been doing in the past is not good or hasn't been successful. And so that's one of the fundamental premises that I would really like to talk to, maybe not necessarily in this meeting, but I have to take note that a lot of these bullet points, and I think they're correct, talk about change, change, change. And that is what we're talking about. The last bullet point seems to carry with it a note of no change. And I don't think we've not changed, but also there's this, if we don't change business as usual, get the usual results. It kind of feels to me like that's saying that's not a good result. And so at some point, I'd really like to discuss that.
Okay, yeah, we actually are going to get into that more because that is a really important question. I mean, if everyone likes it how it is, that's an important data point. So these are good things to know. So
all right, thank you.
It's a very important question. Yep. All right, Eric, go ahead.
So, I guess the best way to think about how we move through the comprehensive plan process is through these three basic inputs. We listen, we have done a ton of outreach, and I'm going to talk about that in a second, well before I got here. Kind of closely tied to that is understanding what's working and what isn't, and trying to be self-critical in that way, kind of tied to your point, Alderman Arnett. And then ultimately, we do a lot of analysis of the data that we have available, and try to understand trends and where we are headed. And we don't always have all the data we would like, but we certainly have a lot. And so we'll be talking about some of that today. In terms of what we've heard, I think this was really helpful for me because I came here in July. This process has started about a year prior, and we had done a lot of outreach prior to COVID. So we just tried to do a tally here of everything that has gone into the comprehensive plan thus far in terms of community outreach. It's pretty significant. We were fortunate to do quite a few in-person meetings, many at Pip Moyer prior to COVID. Some of you were probably at those. We've done a lot of virtual presentations since then, and quite a few since I've been here. I've been really trying to meet every single civic association I can, and I've probably hit many of them so far. We have a few that are currently in the works. One with the Greater Parole Civic Association for next week, and we're going to continue to do that. It's really, particularly since I'm relatively new, I use this not just for comp plan, but just also to build relationships with invested residents. And the task force meetings are, they are not specifically tied to the comprehensive plan always, but so much of what happens in the Forest Drive Task Force, the Maritime Task Force, the Affordable Housing Task Force is closely tied to the content, the recommendations and goals we have in the comprehensive plan. And, so we have been extremely busy with those task force meetings over the last 2 years, I would say, frankly. And I've been attending the Forest Drive one since I've gotten here, and all the others. We've done quite a few work sessions with this body already prior to me joining the staff. We've done some with Planning Commission as well. We have started to meet with Planning Commission every month as of last month. So we've done 2 presentations just in the last 2 months to Planning Commission. And then we've had these surveys. We did a preliminary survey prior to me being here that got pretty good response, 385. It wasn't as, I would say, it was not as representative of the population as we would have liked, and kind of pointed to just, ongoing challenges in reaching certain segments of the population. We've tried to rectify that, but obviously very challenging during COVID. But we have a few surveys that are still out. The Redevelopment Survey, the Transportation Survey, and the Simple Survey are still active. And we kind of made a decision recently just to keep those open to try to pick up as much input as we can. One of the things we've learned recently.
Oh, Mr. Lashinsky?
Yeah.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
I just want to, thank you. Publicly, as you all know, the last work session that we had, I was not happy at all about the plan and what was proposed for Ward 3. After that work session, Mr. Gerald, our city manager, brokered a meeting with Dr. Nash and Mr. Lashinsky. We sat down and we talked about it for an hour. It came away, I was extraordinarily pleased after the meeting. There were some things, I'll be honest, that I never thought about, that I really didn't understand, that they brought to my attention. But I was very pleased by the meeting. They were very good with explaining things to me that I wasn't quite sure about, and bringing some things to my attention that I'd never thought about. So I want to thank them so very much for that. I did have a meeting this week with the Greater Parole Community Association Executive Leadership Team, and there is a meeting scheduled with them next week. But also today I had a meeting with Dr. Nash and Mrs. Wellman. So I am very pleased with what came out of those meetings, but I wanted to say it publicly since the last time I was not happy, but right now we're moving in the right direction, and I want to thank everyone, including Mr. Gerald, for helping in that regard. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Alderwoman. Yeah.
Thank you, Alderwoman. We enjoyed meeting with you too. Thought it was a very good conversation.
Yeah.
Rhonda, can you do the one for Ward 8?
How much you paying?
Much as it takes.
And like I said, I'll be honest, there's some things that Dr. Nash brought to my attention that it was obvious, but I never got it. But I didn't think about it. And I thought that was a true breakthrough. So I'm very grateful for that. So thank you all.
I guess I should interject and also add that Eric really was very gracious with Ward 1 as we kept him till maybe 11 o'clock at night at our meeting. And I was very proud also of my constituents being so involved and very disciplined in going through the whole structure of the comp plan and the categories. Eric, I hope you were pleased as well.
No, yeah. I mean, I felt there was momentum, so I was happy to stay on. You're fortunate to have a very disciplined organization and chair, so yeah. I could tell he really wanted to get through it.
Oh yeah, I keep him in line.
We've learned a lot along the way, and we decided to pepper the presentation with some pop quizzes. There's no pressure here, but these are just some of the key facts that we've been learning that kind of playing into our thinking about the city. So, any idea what the fastest growing demographic in Annapolis is? Well,
elderly white.
Australian?
It could be that.
Hispanic.
It's basically just seniors 65 and up, not being more particular than that. But I mean, this is a very fast growing demographic.
Yeah, it's here for us old guys.
So, I think anybody that lives here should be aware of that, but it's in the data. And that means that's we get an overwhelming response in our surveys from that demographic. I think it's, which is good, but, I think we also have to work to getting response from the rest of the city too. So this is something you'll remember we shared last time, just kind of keeping in mind these ongoing concurrent efforts that are important to include in the comprehensive plan. They give us recommendations. In many cases, these are bodies that are, they're by nature they're temporary and they're very narrowly focused. So they're not necessarily thinking comprehensively. And I know I've talked with some of you about how we coordinate with them. I mean, it's important for them to have the independence to be thinking broadly about what they're tasked, but ultimately we sort of need to bring their recommendations into the comprehensive perspective and understand that there are trade-offs everywhere. And so that's kind of how that works. We take their recommendations very seriously and try to integrate them within the comp plan. The Eastport Terrace Harbor House Choice Neighborhood Master Plan, that is something that we're actively working with HACA on identifying a timeline for that. We're scheduled to meet with them for probably the third time in a few weeks, early next week. And then we're going to give you an update on the APF ordinance towards the end of this presentation. So I'm looking forward to sharing that. If there's one thing that's been clear since I've been involved here in terms of the types of cross-cutting issues that are affecting the city that I hear about more often than not, and they're kind of driving my workload, they're all pretty much tied to land use, and the pattern of development that we've seen over the last many years. So this is a incomplete list, but these are the types of issues that I've been dealing with significantly. And on the left are the elements that we're including in the comprehensive plan, mostly by mandate from the state, but they provide a good structure to the comprehensive plan. The land, Dr. Nash talked about the importance of the land use element to comprehensive plan. I'm going to explain a little bit more about why that is. But it's kind of a mirror, in a sense, it's a mirror of our values, how we want to leverage our resources, and really what's important to us as a city and population. But those chapters are really not sufficient to sort of give the comp plan a vision. And so the guiding principles is a set of visions that we've developed to essentially give the comprehensive plan a unique perspective that represents where we are now, 2021, looking towards 2040. These themes of equity, health, and resilience came out of our community engagement process. They've been reinforced by COVID in terms of challenges that we're dealing with as a city. And then we came up with this kind of tripartite structure of thriving city, functional city, adaptive city to reflect those foundational themes, and then the guiding principles are within that. And, this is a pretty important set of principles that we want to be threaded through the comprehensive plan. I just wanted to stop for a second and allow you all to digest this list and think about whether we're hitting the mark here. We will obviously be sharing this presentation and you can give it some more thought, but I'd be happy to have a little discussion about these right now if you'd like. particularly if you see anything missing from this that is a priority for you.
Well, Eric. So, you started off with the elephant in the room, and I think it's going to be a continual tension. It's certainly something that Alderman Gay and I have exchanged a lot of ideas about. And I think there are inherent trade-offs between interest groups right in that whole housing affordability. I know we have that whole committee working on it. And I think that some of the things that I find that I need is more definition about what the goals are underlying this. Mm-hmm. So I have over here a study that shows, and I think it came from Duan's affordability study that shows a large number of affordable houses available in the city right now. Mm-hmm. And like, for example, I talked to my own sister and I say she wants to advocate for affordable housing for teachers. And I said, well, gee, I think there's some really good housing not that far away from where you are. Yeah, but I don't want to live there. Well, I mean, what do you want? Do you want affordable housing or do you want my house? Which is it? So I think that that's something I know I'm going to get a lot of discussion about in my ward. And I think we're going to have a lot of discussion about in terms of overall goals for the city, even larger than the comprehensive plan. I think this is going to be quite a seminal point of discussion. And I think it could be the topic of an entire work session for the council alone.
Alderman Pindell-Charles?
Yes, I'd like to, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to piggyback on what Alderman Arnett said. I had submitted a document to Dr. Nash and Mr. Lashinsky about what's here in Ward 3. And we do have, we're probably maybe the last bastion of affordable housing here. We have a lot of frontline workers. We have housing that is affordable, and we have built some housing that we're in the process of town courts. But we do, in many of our communities, they are affordable and they're available either for sale or for rental. And so that should not go unnoticed or overlooked. So I definitely agree with what Alderman Arnett has said. It's just a matter of kind of looking around and seeing what's available. So thank you, Alderman Arnett, for bringing that to our attention.
Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, if I could follow on to that.
Sure.
I think that this question really strikes at the heart of growth assumptions. How many, we're at 40,000 people, give or take. We've grown traditionally extremely slowly, mostly through annexation. And so some of the fundamental questions are, how many new neighbors do we want in the city? Do we want to go from 40,000 to 50,000? Do we want to go from 40,000 over the next 10 years to 41,000, which would be pretty characteristic of the kinds of growth that we've had in the past? And all of these then get to these issues. And I remember your briefing for the Planning Commission where we're talking about one of the ways to get affordable housing is to do mixed use housing. And you had a whole set of different concepts you were showing about mixed use at the Giant Shopping Center, mixed use at Growls, and so forth. And those will definitely increase the population. They will be targeted to a particular population, could certainly have integrated income housing, could definitely provide more affordable housing than is largely the case in Ward 8. But they also bring more people, and they bring those evil words, traffic and parking, and all of those things just get thrown into the pot, and they bring with them a lot of emotional response. And so, again, I think that this is really one of the very crux ideas that is going to be a topic of debate in the comp plan. You've got the next one, enhanced community character. Community character has always been a very ephemeral notion. It's almost like it's in the eye of the beholder. but I would not put that anywhere near the same kind of urgency for discussion and policy making as I would the things that underlie affordable housing, the growth issues. Where is it? Where's the concentration going to be? Are we going to have opportunity areas? Where are those opportunity areas? What are the traffic? What are the transit services? So on and so forth. So, I could stop right there and have a whole work session on just this topic alone.
Pendle Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As far as enhanced neighborhood character, I think that sums up Ward 3. And so for Ward 3, I think that's an extremely important component here. We go back, of course, to the Civil War. So for us, that character is that historical character is very important. It may not be for other wards, but for us here in Ward 3, it is. Thank you.
Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, just quickly, I think these all look really good, but I do think that the devil's in the details in terms of, in this case, the devil's in the actual goals that are going to be attached to each of these sections. So that's, I think, I don't know where you are with the process, but I think those would certainly be at some point useful to comment on as well.
Yes, we can. That's a good point. We'll have to come back when we have our goals in place and do a check-in with you at this point. We just kind of wanted to make sure we're not missing anything really big and obvious here, or if there's anything that's we know is going to be an issue. I mean, it's good to hear the concerns about housing affordability and how that's defined. I mean, a lot of places define it in terms of how much what percentage of your income you pay for your rent or mortgage. And in that respect, Annapolis and Anne Arundel County has a pretty high, it's called a rent burden. It has a pretty high rent burden compared to a lot of other places. So that's, one way to measure it. But we can definitely go into more information, more detail, and define those better.
Yeah, and you're right to say, I mean, housing affordability is a very, it's vague, in this context here. We've been, every chance we can, when we talk to the Affordable Housing Task Force, we've been emphasizing that from our comprehensive planning perspective, a big emphasis is on the so-called missing middle housing, the starter homes, the affordable rentals that maybe people who are living in public housing could move into ultimately. But certainly my colleague, Teresa Wellman, hates hearing that we have an affordable housing problem, because she's done a remarkable job in rehabilitating and adding new housing for the lowest income residents in our community. But it's the people that are making, 80% to 120% of the median area median income that are still having a hard time finding housing. So, the whole idea is providing more options for housing. And, I would be the first to say that, just by creating more housing opportunities, it's, that's not enough to, ensure that they're going to be affordable. There has to be a deeper policy there. But certainly without creating more of the opportunities, they're not going to get there. So, and I would also say that, part of the reason why enhanced neighborhood character is in here with housing those are inextricably linked. It's usually the first thing we hear when we talk about locating additional housing is this concern about the impact it's going to have to existing communities. So we need to combat that and be kind of vigilant in how we address it, and recognize that those things are really tied together, trying to be receptive. So I'm going to share some more information in this presentation to kind of get to how we're thinking about that. It's essentially more context sensitive.
I got three hands up. Ellie was first, then Rob, then
follow
Rob.
up on. Oh, okay.
Ellie?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. On the compact and connected development, does that mean connected through transportation of some sort to each other? And my concern there is the connectivity to downtown, you know, with developments outside. I mean, I would love more people to come downtown, you know, especially during this pandemic, and introducing some kind of transit way to do that. Would that be under that category?
Yes, and generally it does. It's particularly in, you know, regard to pedestrian and bike connectivity, as well as
all sorts of ways, yeah.
We have a lot of, you know, we have a lot of streets that don't go through, but so you're looking for any opportunity to really tie places together and shorten trips that people won't be able to.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Great. Thank you.
Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I thought connectivity meant tunnels from every. So just going down the list, and I'm looking for my current hot topic favorite, which is water access and water safety, which is very much part of the Maritime Task Force, but also other more localized issues. Is that going to be subsumed under improve access to community services, or where does that show up in the scheme?
Well, we have the sort of equitable access to the waterfront.
Oh yeah, I see it. You're right. I didn't get far enough down the list.
Okay.
What does enhanced public realm, does that mean we get an increase in our alderman compensation?
Not according to Rick.
No, I know. No, but more seriously, what does that mean?
Well, so like on one end of the spectrum, you have the City Dock project, which is, you know, major. It's basically acknowledging, I think, what we've known for years, that our public spaces, you know, need to do more, and that's a unique example. Obviously, it's a prime public space, but you know, at the smaller scale, it's everything from looking at ways for the street end parks to provide for more, you know, adding floating docks to more of them, making sure that our neighborhood playgrounds have the kinds of features that are relevant to the people who use them. Perhaps there's opportunities for concessions in some of our public spaces that could provide service opportunities for small business or services for people, you know, food service or otherwise. I mean, it's pretty broad, you know, like most of these, you know, they need more definition that we would be providing the comp plan, you know, narrative to go along. But that's kind of what we're talking about.
So that brings up kind of a procedural point, and one of the things that I thought this work session would be good. I mean, the question is, have we missed any policy goals? Part of this harkens back to the question that Rob asked. We need more definition of what's underneath the hood for each one of these in order to more fully understand whether we think there's a missed goal or not. And perhaps we're jumping on your presentation. Maybe that's coming later in the presentation, but if it's not, I think that, I think we could stay on this page and have a whole work session just talking about everything that's involved here, and maybe developing, hey, this looks like it's a pretty comprehensive list, or, oh no, you didn't get this thing or that thing. So, I mean, I appreciate this list. I do appreciate the whole effort. And I appreciate this list. I hope the next pop quizzes we're going to see later on will be able to pass. But I think this is a very important page, and it really is all about what I had hoped when we had this meeting we would be able to dig into much more completely. Things like improved health outcomes, given that we don't have a health department in the city, it seems to me like that would come from having increased things like trails and paths, and maybe expansion of things that are provided by Parks and Recs, that would be something, but it doesn't seem like it's really part of the current city services. Robust and creative economy, I see that as part of Stephen Rice and Hope Stewart's role, but I don't think they're enough. I think we've got to be much bigger in our creativity there. And some of the things that are part of the Maritime Task Force are speaking to robustness of the maritime economy in the city. So I can see the linkages, but I think it's really going to be critical to get in to the much more of the things that are underneath these topics.
Yeah, your points are well taken. But I agree. The devil is in the details, and we'll be providing that level of detail soon enough.
Savage.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Eric, just one thing I'd suggest adding in here, because I do see there's bicycle pedestrian connectivity, there's compact and connected development, which both touch on mobility, and I think are both part of mobility. But the one, I know this term was, I think Alderman Arnett said, was the elephant in the room, but the one elephant in the room that's not mentioned is traffic. And that is something that I believe was in the last comp plan, but is also something that myself, but I think many of us, traffic is a huge concern for people. And I think that needs to be on this list, because I think that needs to be a guiding principle for the development of the comp plan, is because, and I'll get into that later when I have some of my longer comments, but I just think that needs to be on the staff's mind when they're developing this.
Got it.
Thank you. I didn't see any other hands up. We keep going. Thanks, Eric.
Certainly, keep moving here.
Alderman Gay.
General comment or just on what this screen here?
Just people have been commenting when they want.
Okay, I'll just jump in later.
Yeah, so the next few, you may remember we shared last time, it just generally how we're structuring these chapters of the comprehensive plan into goals, metrics, and recommendations. This is just one example. It's a snapshot from something in our draft housing chapter, and the recommendations for this particular goal are more than the two that I'm showing, but just wanted to give you a sense of the level of detail that we're talking about here, which is important. The metrics are challenging to come up with in a way that actually be helpful and indeed measurable, but that's just something that we've determined is important for accountability and just making sure we're making progress towards the goals. And towards that, the action plan is something that would come later towards the end of the comprehensive plan. It's kind of a summary chart. It would be divided based on the chapters. So transportation actions, housing actions, community facilities actions, and so forth. It's a way of helping us prioritize, based on time frame, level of investment. We want to be clear about the metric and who's responsible. The idea that would be that there's a lead responsible party from the city that would be complemented by potentially other city staff or agencies and community stakeholders who are invested in that particular action as well. And then there may be some prerequisite to actually doing that recommendation, that we're waiting on something else. And so we want to clarify that as well. But this is a pretty significant innovation, I think, in how we've done the comprehensive plan in the past. So I think it'll be pretty meaningful. This one, we wanted to get your read on a couple of things. I don't know if Julian, if you were able to load those. It's not the end of the world. Okay. Yeah. Oh. Okay. Yeah, go ahead. The idea here, these are anonymous answers. We wanted to get your pulse on some of these topics that we think are important to understanding priorities. So the idea is you should be able to, on your screen, select your top 3, and they'll go to Julian, and then we'll be able to show the results. And you
Julian.
It says panelists can't vote.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you got a teaser as to what we're asking about here. So hopefully. So we're asking you to pick 3 from the first group and combined with the second group. So 3 total. They're all, first 2 questions are basically all part of the same question. So. Julian, on their screens, are they able to scroll, or are they relying on me to scroll? Do you know?
We can scroll, yeah.
Okay. And then when you've completed that, there's a third question that's looking for your top 3 selections on what's important in terms of future development. So it may seem similar to the first 2 questions, first question, but it's the idea is to think specifically about a new development that is coming in. What would you be concerned about most?
Is the third page one we're supposed to be able to click on? Because that's not working.
This one, this question.
Yeah.
Try scrolling down a little bit, Sheila. It works for me.
Maybe I clicked on too many in the previous one. Is that what?
Are there just 3 questions? Because I can't get beyond question 3.
Yeah, that's right. There's just 3. We're going to have a few more.
All right. Hey, Eric, I have to tell you, this is a wonderful idea. I'm enjoying this.
Ross wants a whole exam to go through.
Yeah, right.
Tests that you don't have to study for are generally pretty fun.
There is none of the above one, though, here. That's not an option. Or all of the above.
I'm not able to vote on the third question or to submit my answers.
I did it for you, Sheila.
Okay, thank you.
Well, you have to scroll down to submit the answers.
Well, yeah, but submit isn't highlighted either, so that you can do that.
It was
somebody's trying to answer mine and already submitted it. I don't know what that is.
No, that's mine.
Okay.
This might be a practice poll. We'll have to keep working on this.
You are dealing with your lowest common denominator respondents.
Well, we didn't know there was a limit that we had to put fewer answers. So we'll know that for next time, not to put so many choices.
So is there a limit on numbers 1 and 2?
Number 1 and 2, we're looking for 3 choices between those 2. So no more than 3 between the first 2 questions. That was supposed to be 1 question that got broken up. And then
somebody's operating mine also, so I can't do it.
How many responses have we had submitted? Do we have? Oh, out of the 9 of us.
I submitted mine.
And I didn't submit mine, so that's very interesting.
Right. Drop it off at our office.
We'll keep working on this. Yeah, Julian, why don't you see what we have? Show us what we have.
It's like playing spades and somebody got too many spades. That's good. Something happened to the deck. Something happened to the deck.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it looks like we have, it's pretty close. Except for parking availability.
Exactly. I was about to say, notice parking availability.
Oh, that is so refreshing to see. People don't care about parking. Yay.
The top one was job opportunities, looks like, unless a couple people voted twice.
Yeah.
But I think that's diversity, affordable housing, safety, recreational. Those are the top, and cultural activities. So
I wouldn't vote twice. I'm not a Democrat. Come on.
Stop the steal.
Julian, is there a way to save the poll results? Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Great.
We should do this in each of our wards and then see how our responses compare to our constituents' priorities.
That would be interesting.
That would be very interesting.
Yeah, we could maybe refine this a little bit more. And then...
I have a feeling in Ward 8 parking availability would not be 0.
All right. Well, thank you for being our guinea pigs on this. It's a good feature. I think we want to use more of. So I know this is going to be a hot topic based on the conversation so far, but growth is on our minds. Conventionally, the city has just grown outwardly until now, and we're not really doing that anymore, or very minimally. We're constrained. Obviously, there's a few parcels that make sense to annex for efficiency of services, things that you are all very aware of. And so we have to, if we're thinking about economics, quality of life, level of service, we have to look inwardly and look at infill opportunities. And this is something you might recall came up the last presentation. Any guesses how many comprehensive plans, Mac, we've been talking about mixed use development?
3.
I don't even know how many comprehensive plans we've had.
That's the question.
I think 62 was the first one.
I would say
basically every 10 years. So
everything.
And what was the first one?
62.
1962, I think.
62.
Yeah.
Can I get a copy of that?
Sure.
I would say in all.
Oh, 6, 7.
Well, 3, at least
3.
1985. And interestingly, the terminology has changed somewhat. In 85, we talked about mixed use clusters. It's a little hard to see, but on that one, portions of Forest Drive and West Street, and really just a few portions everywhere, all over the city, but clusters. Centers in 98, the orange areas here. And then in 2009, we're just calling it mixed use. This is a type of land use that is in our future land use map. It's just called mixed use. just kind of, going back over this slide from the last time we met, I mean, the reasoning from a fiscal perspective is the efficiency of how the land is used versus single use land use. And this is just an example from Asheville, North Carolina. They have a higher density downtown than Annapolis. I don't want to get distracted by that. They're comparing a Walmart to a 6-story downtown, kind of a historic building downtown that was adapted to include residential and retail and office, I believe. And, and so what this study showed is that the mixed use in terms of revenue for the city just really kind of blows out all the other options in terms of how you use the land. And retail taxes is maybe less relevant here, but certainly property taxes and residents and jobs are all pretty relevant to here. So that's one side of mixed use. I mean, I think there's lots of other aspects to what go into a land use guideline. And, this graphic was just something you may remember as well from the last presentation, just kind of showing in the black clouds, the things that we typically already do as part of our review process. That, they're very straightforward in general, but they represent our values just to a large degree and what's important. And then in green is a host of other sort of values that could be embedded in our code, if we wanted to change it in a way that would look at form-based zoning, performance-based zoning. These are ideas that have been around for some time, and a lot of jurisdictions have found some ways of incorporating them so that you have greater predictability in what you're going to get. I think that one of the big things to think about in terms of growth is not that we're not going to be able to stop growth from happening. We're not, putting a wall around the city, charging a toll to enter the city, but so people will continue to develop properties within the city. I think it's a question of whether we're going to be proactive about the kind of development we want to see and look at the zoning that we have and figure out ways of making it more predictable. That's kind of one of the themes I want to highlight. And so,
Eric,
yeah.
If I could, I'm not sure if you can see my hand, Mr. Mayor. Can you see me?
Yeah, I can't see you.
Okay. Yeah, I just had while we're talking about land use, some questions and comment. So my comment is that, I just found out like 2 days ago who Fran Lebowitz is, and I've been obsessed with her, and I've been watching her videos, and she was talking about, cities and change. And she made a point of, if I didn't want to see change, if I didn't want to see density, or if I didn't want to see growth, I would have lived in the country. And I was just like, that's so accurate. It made me think of this because in tying that into, this Facebook poll that's going on in the forum that's saying, if you're young, what are some things you'd like to see in the city and all of this? And people are like, well, I moved here 25 years ago, or I moved here, 30 years ago, and it was not a city. But what you're saying is that it's not true. You're saying for the past 36 years, the comprehensive plans, which we're supposed to follow, has, put in motion plans for us to develop so that we can continue to grow and create living conditions for individuals. So 2 questions with all of that said is, how is the Planning and Zoning Department keeping a commitment to the people and creating, growth so that there are houses and homes to live? Are you, because what I'm seeing is that over the last 36 years, we have not held that commitment. So what is different about this department and this staff? That'd be my first question.
Well, I'll answer to some degree, and Sally can probably jump in too, because I'm relatively new. But what I will say that we've done some pretty significant things to our zoning code over the years that have really, I would say they have changed the city for the better. I mean, if you think about Inner West Street, that was triggered by a zoning change that created this MX zone. And really, I mean, that was set in motion years before anything, happened on the street, and in terms of business redevelopment along that corridor. So that's pretty major. And then the business corridor enhancement area, and that was actually a new zone created for parts of West Street in the late 80s. So going back even further, that has not really led to a whole lot of new development, but some. And the whole idea was improving the character of Upper West Street and creating more opportunities there. But you could also point to some of the changes on Forest Drive as being related to some change, implementation of recommendations. It's kind of going back to one of the first slides. I mean, the recommendations and the comprehensive are one thing, and then they do need to be implemented. And, so it's a complicated function of planning and implementation and enforcement, and
but if we were to fix our zoning codes or implement them based off of the recommendations over the course of the next 10 years, based on, wouldn't that make your job easier? Isn't it difficult as a planning or chief or comprehensive chief to enforce or to work with a plan that almost is useless if we aren't accurately following it to create a more a better city to live in? And just to that point, though, it appears that to me, and I just rode past Boucher and Jefferson earlier, and they're like 3 houses down off of that corner. There's there was this really nice home. It should have been an affordable home, but they've torn it down and they're rebuilding it now. Why does it appear that over the course of the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen more single-family developments go through, people remodeling or revamping the whole home, adding additions, but we aren't seeing any. I shouldn't say we aren't seeing any. We're seeing mixed-use development at such slower pace, which is creating almost a really, really unique living condition. I mean, as based on the Affordable Housing Task Force, we have some of the highest rates of housing up in areas like Seattle and New York. Why are we trending backwards while allowing the single family development at much faster pace?
Yeah, it's great points. I mean, it's some of that is purely economics and what, the kind of developments that are yielding a certain kind of profit margin for a developer, or the kind of people that can afford to live in the city and what kind of homes they want to live in. But it's our zoning code. I should acknowledge, there are challenges to doing mixed use in some cases, or doing anything more than a single family home in parts of the city. So, I mean, that's some of what you're seeing is just frankly limitations in our zoning code. I have some slides in here that kind of get at, our desire to improve that. So, I mean, I think some of this will get addressed in the presentation.
Mr. Mayor.
I got Alderman Arnett and then Alderman Savage.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think that this is going to be one of those areas of debate, and I think that there's a presumption that the zoning code isn't working, which I don't subscribe to. But I think that one of the answers to Alderman Gay's question is there, and you said it, Eric, economics. There's a market, and the market responds to the market incentives, and the market incentives are that single family homes are desirable for those with means. And if we want to change that, I don't think it's a matter of changing the code. I think it's a matter of changing the incentives to developers to build more dense, and the other kinds of incentives to supplement the ability of people to be able to buy those homes through some kind of a subsidy or whatever. But I do hope we're going to get back to the slide you presented a few slides ago showing the economic yield of income on the mixed use, because I also want to see the corresponding slide that shows the economic cost of the density. So that gets to Mary Burkholder's work in the impact analysis model that shows where we get to a neutral position, because I think high density also comes with more cost in services. So we really do need to look at the balance, both sides of that equation.
Alderman Savage, and then Sally, are there the speakers after you guys? Are a lot more slides, because I can sort of hold off on questions a little while if you want, or if you think we've got time, we can just keep taking them as we go. Alderman Savage is next.
Yeah, maybe we could take Alderman Savage's question, and then we don't have too much more, so we could probably just try to power through.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you. Just on the whole growth slide and discussion that you had, personally, and I also think my constituents have a lot of concern about just growth for the sake of growth. And I don't subscribe to that idea. And I'm not saying that's what you were saying, but I think that's an important distinction in terms of what kind of growth are you talking about. Because I think growth can lead to increasing costs on our infrastructure, and also just impact our infrastructure to a level that our constituents may not want, be it increased traffic or increased impact on our whatever, sewage system, stormwater system, schools, you name it. And those are things where I know one of the things that was mentioned in the sector study, which I disagreed with, was the comment that I think, if I remember correctly, that the one way we pay for that impact or infrastructure is through increasing the tax base. And I think it remains to be seen whether or not increasing the tax base can really keep pace with the increased needs on our infrastructure, or that our constituents would even want to live in an increasingly urbanized city. That's certainly something I think we need to talk about more. Then there's also the fact that we live on a peninsula and have a lot of restrictions, physical restrictions to growth. There are only so many traffic improvements we can make, only so many forests we can clear and that kind of thing, places we can build. And essentially limits the number of people we have living in certain areas, at least until we really overhaul our transit in the global sense, the mobility in the city, like make it more walkable, having smaller bus systems, that kind of thing. But I do think there are other models. There are it's like steady state growth model, which is where you plan on improving what you have and not necessarily just expanding. So that's, and that's also, I think, related to the mixed use issue, which you also mentioned. Because I think that where I think there are a lot of benefits to that in terms of improving mobility, offering those services and more services, more places to live, potentially more affordable housing. But again, that's potentially greater urbanization, and I think that requires a lot of not only public outreach but also a discussion with council about what exactly that means, and hopefully the comp plan will really try to define what exactly are the benefits from mixed use that we can see. So I think that's so I guess that's my one. Well, it sounds like you're going to get into adequate public facilities, which is obviously linked to all this. So I'll wait for that comment. But those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Mr. Mayor, can I just please?
Sure, Alderman, go.
Because I think this, as Ross mentioned, land use is very, very, very important. And and they mention a lot of things like market. There's not or the market is shifting this way, or the market may be presenting itself more for single family housing. And I think that's false. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a public housing waiting list of 2,500 families. There is a market for mixed use. We just haven't tapped into it. When I look at especially areas like in my ward and Ross's ward and Eastport, we're one of 4 certified food deserts in the county. We need a grocery store. We need mixed development. We need mixed use to, help our city, to help our constituency. There is a market for that. They do need it. And the point that we keep hearing like traffic and all of those things, I 100% agree. They need to be brought to the table from the jump, because with that growth, I like to use the word growth because when I hear urbanization, it makes my spine tingle. It makes me think of it just sounds racist because they're like urbanization and the fear of growth. It's like that makes me think that there's a fear of what's wrong with urban communities and urban neighborhoods. So I like to use the term growth. When we grow, I think that it will help. There will be jobs and opportunities with the land use and with the growth of our city. Otherwise, I just think that we will be stuck in this cycle in the year 2020 or 2032 when the next comp plan comes up. So I get the fear and the hesitancy based off of, what the vocal majority has said. But I think that we really have not yet tapped into what the larger community, the middle and lower class, are really looking for. And that can't be overlooked as we go through this process. But I think this is really good conversation. Let this land use slide. I'm glad that we're having this conversation before it's presented in its final form.
You, Alderman Tierney.
Yeah, really quickly, because before you get off this topic, I know you showed a slide of Asheville, North Carolina, and there was this mixed-use building. And the downtown is sort of a mixed-use development that hasn't been optimized. And one of the things that's missing is the residential part of it. And one other thing about Asheville, that in my research on sprinklers, they have one of the highest or the most strict sprinkler requirements for their buildings because they suffered a very major fire downtown. So this is sort of a plug for whenever that time comes and we look at sprinkling downtown buildings. It's really important because we can then have residential apartments downtown. I mean, we're missing that. And the structure and the infrastructure is already there to have that density. That density will be welcomed downtown. So I just wanted to have you note that when the sprinkler bill ever comes up again.
No, I mean, I look out. That's my view when I go to the office is
doesn't it kill you?
Underutilized upper floors.
These beautiful windows that are being underutilized. Yeah, I'd love an apartment downtown.
That is an important thing to keep in mind. I'm thinking about it. We have just a few, we wanted to try the polling questions again, and then we just have a few more slides before we we move into the APF part of the presentation. But so these are getting at just kind of some specific, this one, I think this one got messed up, Julian. Let's see. I think the responses are for a different question. This question would have had some responses related to housing. But we can keep moving if you want to. It's really not that big a deal. We can, if you want to fix that, and then we can come back to it. That's totally fine. Just. Again, something you may remember from the last presentation, we have these zones in the city that qualify as kind of performance-based, where we're very clear about the kind of development that we want to see there. It's not just about setbacks and building height and massing and number of units, but there are design guidelines associated with these places that are really intended to yield the character that we want. And they've been generally very successful. We're trying to do that right now with West Annapolis as part of the comprehensive plan. Understanding the commercial area of West Annapolis is a place that hasn't changed a whole lot over the years. And the communities adjacent to it would like more options there for retail and among other things. And there's obviously a lot of surface parking that could be better utilized. And so this is kind of the breakdown of the existing zoning districts there. B1, B2 are commercial, P and PM are more office oriented. We learned there's limitations in what type of uses can go into those districts. And our consultant, Stantec, has come up with an alternative that we think would yield the kind of development the community is looking for. It still treats Annapolis Street as essentially a community main street, but the shape of these districts has changed, and really to acknowledge that there's a transition from Raoul Boulevard to Annapolis Street that could accommodate some uptick in density as you move away from the residential neighborhood and get towards what is essentially a major gateway into the city with a stadium and a courthouse that are significant features. So
Eric and Mr. Mayor, can I just a quick point? Yeah, just on that, because it makes me think of the previous, I think, presentation you gave us where you had a couple of case studies. But so this, I have your West Annapolis, but I know you also had, I think in your presentation at the Planning Commission, I haven't seen, but kind of a case study or a plan for the area in my ward. And I really would strongly suggest speaking with the communities around those sites. And I'm sure you have to a certain degree. And I'd like to help you with any effort along those lines, because I think any kind of, I think fear is a bit of a too strong of a word, but I think people move here for a certain type of character. And when you're talking about a larger change in the type of neighborhood character, which mixed use can do, and I think that needs to be something that's definitely communicated early on to the community. And so, I'm going to be having a virtual town hall, probably sometime in early March. I would love to have you or somebody else from planning and zoning attend, and we'll have to figure out how long, because I think I'm gonna have some other topics as well. But just to kind of brief all of us and get our thoughts on that, all of us being the Ward 7 community, on some of your ideas out there.
That would be great to join, even just in a minimal kind of role. I will say the dynamics are very different in that the Bay Ridge Shopping Center than here, partly because you're at the end of Forest Drive and you're not, adjacent to the highway essentially. But a lot of what's come out of the Forest Drive Task Force has been pretty enlightening and helpful to, make sure that we dial back some of what may have been presented previously. And so I feel like we've gotten a pretty good perspective from that as to what might be more appropriate there. But I would just, any opportunity to meet with your constituents would be valuable.
Yeah, and it would be great to explain, we're not necessarily changing what is allowed there. But we might be representing something different than what is currently there. But that's, I think, what causes a lot of problem is this disconnect, because if we leave our zoning as it is now, people are going to be surprised if something gets redeveloped, because they don't realize that can go there. So we're hoping, the point with this is we're going to be clear that if this is ever redeveloped, it could look like this. Is this what you want? And so we want to know now, if that's not what you want, then we need to make changes to the existing zoning one way or the other.
Right.
Yeah. You did? All right, let's do it.
And we good. Alderman Arnett had a hand up while we're getting that set.
So I want to just support what Sally just said, and it's something that I've had a hard time wrapping my head around. I think it is very, very important to give us a profile of what could happen and see whether or not that's the choice. We don't have that right now, and I think that if I had that as a tool, I could bring that to my constituents and say, did you know this could happen? Did you know this could happen where waterfront apartments are now? And is that what you want? Or should we be changing zonings? As you know, I've advocated lowering the height limit. But I really do subscribe to that, Sally, and I think that's called planning. So I applaud it.
Point taken. So these three questions.
Can I make one comment?
Yeah.
Just one comment?
Absolutely.
Alderman Pindell-Charles.
Okay. No, I couldn't agree with all. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Agree with Alderman on it more. That's part of the discussion that Dr. Nash and Mr. Lashinsky had, and Mr. Gerald, we had a couple of weeks ago. That is huge. Thank you.
Sorry, Alderman Pindell-Charles. I was doing my survey.
That's all
Didn't
right.
see your hand. Anybody else?
These three questions in the poll are really just getting at some specific topics. There's one on housing, one on mobility, and one on waterfront access. And top two choices on the first one, top three on the second, and top two on the last one. Good point.
That apply to you, Julian? Is it working better for everyone this time? Oh, good.
You should have just gotten mine.
Cool. Interesting. Yeah.
Okay, great. We have a little more consensus on these.
Yeah.
Although I cannot see the poll and unmute myself, so now I can't see the poll results. But it does seem like there's some clear ones. First time home buyers, that's important group. That's good.
Mm-hmm. Thanks.
When you say first-time home buyers, I think that should be broadened, because part of the problem too is that some people can't afford to live in a home and they need assistance with their first apartment or their first townhome or whatever. And we just always overlook that and go straight to a house. Everybody doesn't have $450,000 or the credit history to get that. So it should say first-time homebuyer / dwelling unit or first-time dwelling or something. It just shouldn't be home.
That's a good point. Yeah, that's a great point. Because we have a lot of people who have townhomes or, you know, whatever. It's still an investment, and it's still where we want to get people. So.
From Pendel Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Alderman Gay, that goes to the point of, I think most of us clicked on jobs, as one of the other polls has said. So that's all connected with jobs too. So that makes a lot of sense.
Okay. This one, less pressure on this one, but any guesses how many districts we have? Zoning districts?
Is it 38? Something like that? 38?
It's Baskin Robbins, whatever Baskin Robbins is, whatever that number is.
It's 32.
Yeah, dude, it's my guess.
Okay.
31. So very close. Here they are in all their barely fit on a slide. You know, they've grown over the years. They've addressed pressing needs at the time. Things change. So as has been noted already, you know, and they are challenging to administer. There's no doubt about it. They have limitations. They certain level of unpredictability in some cases, particularly the commercial zones, B1, B2, B3. So, you know, this is the kind of the last few slides here before we get into APF. But yeah, I mean, we have been looking at parcels in the city that could be better utilized. You know, either they're not performing well economically, they're not providing the kind of access to services that would be beneficial. They're not providing housing options, and they could be. They have a sea of parking lot that's just not a great thing for our environment, et cetera. You know, basically it's a pretty surgical culling of parcels across the city where we think, and some of these are already, you know, in review as projects. But these are places that we think could be doing better for the city and the people who live here. And so that's what this draft future land use map represents, where the brown are these potential mixed use parcels, and our existing land use map is on the left. You know, and housing, we've talked about quite a bit today. You know, I think this will probably punctuate that discussion. Any guesses how many expressions of interest we've received, or the developers have received for the new town courts project under construction off of West Street?
300.
Yeah, I don't know. I would say something high. Yeah, 3, 4.
Well, I'll just.
First day, I got quite a few when it went in the paper.
900.
Yeah. So
the day that it came out on the front page of the Capitol, I got a whole lot.
I got this this number from Teresa Wellman, who's been working on helping the developer prioritize. So that's a pretty telling number. I mean, this is there's clearly a demand for what this place is offering. There's a demand for what Annapolis offers as a place to live. And so the last two slides here, I just want to preface by saying these are some preliminary ideas.
Yeah, I just want to make one comment about that town courts. Yeah. The other thing is too, we have parole place that is in the works on the corner of Old Solomon's Island Road and Forest Drive. That's supposed to be mixed. Retail on the bottom and affordable housing on the top. So in Ward 3, that is coming down the pipe. Mm-hmm. So thank you.
Eric, before you get to, I did have a question too, but I don't think Gavin can see my hand. I'm sorry.
Sorry, buddy. I saw Alderman Arnett, then you, Dewan. Sorry.
Okay. No problem.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Eric, I think that this 900 demand for these units is somewhat misleading. Yes, that is a demand for people for this kind of housing, but you shouldn't translate that to mean that that's a demand for the residents that are here. That I think that that's an entirely different market. And so I think that's where we keep getting into this rub. If you have something that's very desirable, of course, everybody wants to be there, but that doesn't mean that we necessarily have to make it available to everyone who wants to be there. So I think that's going to be one of those underlying, it's something that Dewan and I talk about back and forth. I don't think we have agreement yet, but at least we have a good dialogue going.
Alderman Gay?
Thanks. I got two parts. Eric, I think that's about accurate because I have friends, residents, constituents that I tell them I have the town court's application link saved in my notes phone. And when people are interested in affordable housing, I send it to them and I say, apply on this link, because this is an opportunity coming up. So I just, Ross, once we get through this, I want you to come walk with me through Eastport and just talk to some of my constituents so you can understand the true need for this type of housing and the true need for this type of development. But secondly, Eric, when you mentioned the 31 different zoning codes, if you could explain to me the difference and if there is any conversation in condensing. For example, B1 and B2, it says B1 is convenience, B2 is community shopping. Yes. Can't that be condensed to just B1 so that you don't have to have the three separate shopping zones?
Yeah, that's actually what I'm getting at with this slide here, although it's not showing all of the current zones that could be replaced or consolidated. But what I wanted to just share here, this is kind of a preliminary idea for more context sensitive districts within the mixed use category of land use, looking at the locations of these potential mixed use parcels, whether they're on transit corridors, at the edge of the city as a gateway, are these parcels already embedded within a neighborhood that has a certain character? Are these existing higher density housing areas that could accommodate more open space, retail that is small scale and relevant to the people who live in that development, or other housing options rather than just all 1 or 2 bedroom apartments? Could there be townhouses or something else? So that's kind of what we're talking about here, a way of consolidating some of those 31 zones into these kind of form-based districts, meaning they respond to the form of the city around them with something that is compatible. And we haven't applied these, parcel by parcel yet, but that's kind of the direction that we're interested in going. And get to your point, Alderman Gay, we're trying to not add more zones. We're trying to consolidate the ones we have so there's no net gain, essentially. And
right. And it might not be that B1 gets combined with B2. It might be that B1 gets combined with P or, something like that, because there are different densities. There's use and there's densities. And I think we're getting to the point where kind of okay to opening up the uses, but I still think we need to be very careful about how we plan for the densities and where those densities go. So you can see we've captured density gradations on these place types, but there's less information about use on them. So that's kind of where we're slowly heading to.
Yeah, it is. It's challenging because, you could say that our B zones, like Eastport Shopping Center or Bay Ridge Shopping Center, they could support other things. They could be more perform differently. But we need to, I think it's important to think about the percentage of commercial activity that should remain, and so these places don't become just all residential, or I think the places that we have commercial activity, we do need to be thinking about how to retain some of those commercial opportunities, and so there's a kind of calibration there and thinking about what's the right mix. It's not unlike what we're dealing with the maritime districts right now, and but just
Pendel Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Lashinsky and Dr. Nash, how much thought or how do you integrate into this the fact that I'll use Ward 3, that we're right on the county line and we have no control over what the county proposes at all? I know there's going to be a multimodal transit center, which, hallelujah, thank you so much. We really need it at possibly in the Annapolis Mall area. But we have once you cross the line of Route 2, whatever they do over there, we can't stop it. And so that's the conundrum that we have in Ward 3. How much of that is integrated into what you've thought about in this plan?
Well,
right. Well, one thing we're working on are performance standards, and I think, do you have a slide on that later, Eric?
No, I did. The last slide here is this case studies one. The next slide.
Okay. Well, basically, we're going to be incorporating how the context of the site performs now, and that will affect what is permitted on that site. So even things outside the city limits can be taken into consideration when we're looking at those the way the site performs now.
And I will say that this neighborhood place type is really, I had parole in mind, when I was thinking about this. It's just, there is a need to preserve the edges of that neighborhood. And so that's kind of that would be a place where that type would be appropriate, maybe in conjunction with one of these others. But that's a real, that's not just unique to parole. There are other neighborhoods where, I think maybe parole is closer to the city line and what you're talking about in terms of the county's development in their portion of that area. But, there are other neighborhoods as well where, I think we're trying to maintain this sort of edge character of that, so that when you enter that neighborhood and there's a character there, and I think that's important to the identity of the city. So
I think I'm talking more about traffic and density, which is brought on from that. We're, like I said, we're right there, and it's nothing we can do about it. Whatever they put on the line, we can't do anything about that. And so that's always our concern as to being right on that edge. In fact, Walgreens, half of Walgreens is in the county and half is in the city. So that, there's the line right there.
So the last, actually, this is the last slide before we kind of move into the APF stuff, but it's really one of the tools that we're looking to use in the comprehensive plan to kind of demonstrate what we're talking about here are these case studies. And these are the 5 sites that we're anticipating right now. And so I think these give us an opportunity to flesh out what we're talking about, and in cases where we haven't reached out to the community members yet, that's when we would do that. So I think there's an opportunity here to kind of get ahead of the next development and kind of be more proactive. So that's the idea. I hope next time we meet, we can share what we've been doing on the West Annapolis Shopping Center, which is really the one that's been kind of a test case so far, since that was identified as kind of a more thorough master planning effort. So I think that will kind of help show what we're talking about here.
Alderman Pan? Alderman Pan?
Howdy. I don't have any
Oh,
questions.
sorry, Alderman Arnett, sorry.
We
Thank
frequently get mixed up, but I'm much better.
I know, we're twins. So I really am intrigued by the direction this land use, and certainly subscribe to the fact that we really cannot have 31 different codes. But I can't help but think, and since I've lived here longer than any of you, I can hearken back to 50 years ago to what Silver Spring looked like and what Bethesda looked like. And I remember when they started to get more dense, more mixed use, more high rise. And I look at them now and I can tell you my nightmare is that that's what Annapolis converts into. And so I really think we have to be extremely careful. And this is what planning is all about. We need to be very careful that we don't set ourselves up to become something that is quite flatly not Annapolis. So these brown zones are, as I say, they're intriguing, but it sure looks a lot like along the intersection of Route 29 and Colesville Road and the intersection of Wisconsin Avenue and East-West Highway have become, as opposed to what they were 50 years ago.
Point taken.
I think we often hear that, Alderman Arnett, is we just don't want Annapolis to be Bethesda. And I think if we get our design guidelines right, we're not going to head that direction. I mean, for one thing, I just don't think there's much appetite for a lot of height. I mean, one thing Alderwoman Pindell-Charles and Eric and I were talking about is, well, maybe you can have along Solomon's Island, Old Solomon's Island, maybe you can have 2 stories by right, and then maybe another story or 2 if you do certain things. So, I just don't think our scale, I think the scale of downtown is what everyone points to as kind of what they like.
Yeah.
Alderman Finlayson and then Alderman Gay. We haven't heard from Alderman Finlayson yet. How you doing?
I'm pretty good. I'm listening. Thank you very much. A couple of questions. One, are these case study sites comparable to what were our opportunity zones in the last comp plan?
So in terms of their scale, or, the site itself, yes, maybe a little bit more narrowly defined, but we're not saying that we're not specifically saying we want to channel development to these places. We're just acknowledging that these are among the places that are likely to redevelop. I think planning and zoning has not a great track record of predicting where something is going to happen. We don't want to be in that business per se, but we do want to sort of help the communities get ahead of the developments. And so those opportunity zones, those in that 2009 comp plan, they said, we specifically want to channel development to these places. That's not what we're saying here. We're just using these as kind of demonstrations of the kind of changes to the zoning code that we think would make sense. And, it's kind of just a demonstration of that. So they're just kind of specific cases for that.
Well, if you recall during with the last comp plan, even those designated opportunity sites were met with considerable consternation, opposition to any sort of development in those areas. So anyway, my other question, I guess, is for Sally. Going back to the 31 zoning classifications. You know, we had this discussion with Director Gutwall when he was here, and he shared with us that Harford County had like 8 for the whole county. And we have 31 for our 7 square miles of the city. Is there a way to make sure, 1, that we don't add any more, and 2, that every effort be made to consolidate some of these zones? And I've heard several people mention different ways, and I know you've addressed those options also. But I just think that we should use this opportunity of the comp plan to try to address all of these zoning classifications. And before you answer that, Mr. Lashinsky, can we get a copy of all of these maps? Or Dr. Nash, will we get a copy of this entire PowerPoint presentation?
We can email it to you, and we'll also post it online.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
For the zoning districts, no, I'm very glad to hear you say that. We support the idea, and if council is behind us, then we can make it happen. So I think if we're all committed to it, we can do it.
Well, I think we should definitely go in that direction. Thank you both.
Alderman Gay, then Alderman Tierney.
Thank you. Julian, if you could put the image up that I sent to you.
Do I need to stop sharing, Julian? Yeah.
So I seen this on Facebook, and I thought it was perfect for the conversation because I keep hearing community character, and this is what they moved here for. And this was where Whitmore Park or Whitmore Garage currently stands. Black owned. There was a black business down there. The people are telling me it was called Polly's. They said the Hyman family lived upstairs. They owned the shop. That's community character that was destroyed and taken from us, that it seems as if we will never, ever see again. Black businesses, growth. And so what about our community character? What about getting back to that? And I think that when I hear them talk about growth and expanding businesses, I think about opportunity for people, opportunity for our residents. Me and Gavin were just at a lunch a couple of weeks ago with about 15 young Black people hungry for opportunity and growth. They want to start businesses and have their families here in this city, and they don't believe they can because they don't believe their city can support them. This is the only, we have memories. Not to say that there aren't Black people who own businesses here, but not enough. That's the community character I want to get back to, because the community character that I think I'm hearing, and I don't want to infer anything, just has me in a whole nother category of people. And so this is just, remember this image and remember what Annapolis used to be. Because if you keep talking about the past, remember, we once thrived here, not just during the later decades, but as slaves, we thrived here and built communities. So remember our community character and remember how we thrive, please, when you take into consideration what Annapolis should be.
You Alderman Tierney.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't see why we can't have that on Main Street again. But my question was, that would be my dream. What is that site at Chickapin Forest? I can't place it. What is there now?
It's a mess. There's a gas station.
1901 West Street.
Yeah, there's a office, two-story or three-story office building with a parking lot in front of it. It's
okay.
There's a strip commercial center.
Okay, yeah.
There's the Verizon office.
I gotcha. I know what you're talking about. Right. Okay. Thanks.
Alderman Pindell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm glad Alderman Gay brought it up. I think Alderwoman Finlayson and I remembered quite vividly amongst maybe a couple other folks, we've been there many times. But what I wanted to say about community character, one of the discussions was the parole community has been here since the Civil War. And part of the building of the homes involved the lumber taken from the barracks from the Civil War soldiers. And we've had discussions about making that, I mean, we don't want to necessarily add to our zones, but making that a historic zone. I mean, we've got downtown. Why can't we have a historic visit Annapolis in parole? We have 41 sites. We did the walk parole brochure back in 2016. The Planning and Zoning Department came to us, but there's no reason why incorporated into that is some sort of business, minority business incubator. That can be all a part of the historic zone. We've got the Rosenwald School, and it all is bound by Chickapan Round Road, Forest Drive, Old Solomon's Island Road, and West Street. And so you're talking about, and that's why I said when we had the earlier discussion, community character. That's the character here. We've visited several cities across the nation, and I'll be quite honest, we go on the white tour and then we go on the black tour. And you get a totally different kind of feel and a different sense of the communities when you do those tours. But I be honest, you know, before we have a tour or get into that with the parole community, upgrading some of the things in our community would be necessary. So that's been part of the discussion as well. So I just want to throw that out there. But there's no reason why we can't have a historic zone and also a minority business incubator. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderwoman.
Can I add to Rhonda's point really quick?
Sure.
Rhonda, and I hope that we can work together on this project, actually, because I've been struggling with the city manager's office and the law office. I requested $50,000 to be put in the, I'm blanking on the word. It's just in the fund right now, in our last budget, and I wanted it to go to African American business development. I was told that we needed to do a study or you know, we needed to create a research plan as to, you know, how African American businesses have been, you know, historically underfunded or whatever. And I have not got it off of the ground. And so we have the money, and I would like to partner with you on this. And maybe we could just get this done before the end of the year is out or before our deadline for legislation is.
Thank you. Alderman Pindell-Charles. Alderman Savage is after you. So thank you.
Okay. Alderman Gay, I love your idea. I'm all about trying to kind of making sure that I'm not a piecemeal kind of person. I want to be able to see more of the picture. What does it look like? Where could it be? And I want a more comprehensive, because I want this part of history as well. Historic and entrepreneurship is big, has been big traditionally for decades in the African American community. We couldn't get jobs with the state or the federal government at some point. So entrepreneurship was huge, but I want it to be more of a comprehensive plan. I'm not saying we're going to be able to get it done this year, okay? But I don't want a piecemeal approach to this. I want to be able to have more of a full, comprehensive plan.
Thank you. Alderman Savage.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think this is a good dialogue to have on the council. So I do want to just respond to a couple of things that Alderman Gay said. And I think, Alderman Gay, I think that this is a great thing to aim for. And I don't think anybody on this council would disagree with you that losing the Black communities, parts of the Black community, losing the Black businesses, and in many ways losing parts of the local Black culture is a bad thing. I mean, I think everybody agrees that's a bad thing, right? And I think everyone would agree that we need to do what we can to rebuild that, especially based on the history of the discrimination in this city. I'm talking, way back, and in terms of the urban removal that was done here. I think many of us have seen some of the local documentaries about some of what happened locally, and so but I think it's important to say that. So I think when we say, when myself or my constituents talk about being concerned about growth, they're not saying they're afraid of that. I think most people would agree that needs to come back. I mean, look at what happened to the old Fourth Ward. I mean, there's a parking garage, and so much of the rich African American history and music scene has just disappeared from that community, and it's awful. But I think so I definitely don't want you to have that conception about when I'm complaining about growth. It's certain types of growth, and I think to me, and I think many in my ward, it means we think of bad growth in the sense of losing, environmental quality, right? More pollution. You risk losing your open space and the forests and wetlands, and you risk having more gated communities, more traffic, unless we place some of those restrictions, which I think gets with the adequate public facilities. But I think building back a diverse community, like you've talked about, is again not the kind of growth that I think would bring those impacts, right? You're not talking about that. You're talking about just rebuilding some of the structure and support for these communities. And I think that's definitely, so I definitely didn't want to have you think that that's what I was implying.
Sally, Eric, how much more of the presentation?
Well, that was the presentation on sort of the comp plan kind of structure and land use stuff. There was a piece related to the APF that we wanted to share. I know we're coming down to 5 o'clock. I think
we need to do that.
Yeah.
Are the council okay for going over a little bit?
We've got transportation at 6. I guess transportation will provide pizza for us.
Right. Right away.
Thanks for understanding. I mean, I think we don't need a ton of time here, but let me share my screen again. And I was going to hand things back over to Sally for this piece. This is the last pop quiz here. Any guesses?
82.
It's been a little more recent than that, but
I've got it here somewhere.
2005.
The year I was born, 82.
Oh, I was so close.
2004. I'm handing things over to Sally, but I just wanted to this point about the Parks Master Plan. I think, as we've been trying to pick off the pieces of the APF to update, parks and recreation seem like as important as any to look at and potentially maybe easier to update. But, a lot of what we're dealing with, working with us, we have a working group we put together of community members and folks from the recreation board. A lot of the things that we're talking about get updated in the Parks Master Plan. And it's something that I think the city would really benefit from having an updated version of, that would address inequities and level of service expectations, metrics. And, we're sort of doing that on the fly here. So I just wanted to put in a plug for that. It's something that we're going to be recommending in the comprehensive plan. But
yes, and we're hoping we get somewhat of your buy-in because we all know the fee and lieu for rec and parks for APF are really low, and I'd like to increase them in fiscal year 22. But I first needed to work through this work group to figure out how exactly I needed to do that. And so we started looking at this map that Eric Borchers at Comp Planning developed called Social Vulnerability. And this takes into several different factors that include income equality, access to transportation, access to housing, all these different social and economic factors, and then kind of puts that on a scale for the city. And it's not really anything you would be surprised by, but it was a question we were asking, how can we make our public facilities more equitable? Because some of them, it's a lot more obvious than others. Like I think Alderman Savage pointed out, like, how do you make water and sewer service more equitable? It doesn't quite fit in the same way as rec and parks do. So go to the next slide. So what we came up with is a way of classifying different kinds of parks and then and defining those, and then making sure that there was certain facilities like a mini park, so a pretty small park, 1 acre or less, make sure there's one of those within a quarter mile of everyone in the city. Making sure there's a neighborhood playground, which is a little bit bigger. You'll see the definitions in the next slide, within a half-mile radius. And community playfields, which are your pretty big Truxton Park kind of quiet waters, within a mile. So if you go to the next slide, we've taken these definitions, so things you will typically see in these. Mini park might be a tot lot, might be just, like a bench. It could be active or passive, but ideally it has some kind of playground equipment. Neighborhood playgrounds, a little bit bigger, maybe some fields, something like that. And then community playfields even bigger than that. So we mapped where in the city we have these facilities, and then we drew a buffer around all of them. So that's better. So you can see the yellow buffer is half mile. So we picked out all of the mini parks, just basically going by size, and then drew a buffer around them. Then, so you can see the 3 different colors. Almost all of the city is within the mile of a community playfield, Truxton Park, except for parts of Wardour, really, and but almost all of the city. But there's a lot of gaps when you're looking at the other 2 kinds of facilities. So we thought, we know, next slide. Okay, we also know that there's certain parks in the city that are used really heavily. And a lot of that has to do with where they are and how many other facilities there are in the area. And so we want to make sure we also look at population, existing population. So we're not always just sending people to the same parks, that we have more reason to show and justify that a new facility is needed. So next slide. So we thought of this 2-step process. One, we're looking at, does the facility exist? If there's a mini park, okay, that's good. If there's not a mini park, they need to build a mini park, no matter what. They can't pay a fee in lieu for a mini park. If there's a neighborhood playground, great. If not, we want to know how many people is it servicing. If it's servicing too many people already based on the national standards for that kind of park, then they have to provide a new facility, or they could pay a fee to improve existing facility or expand an existing facility. And the same would be true for community playfield. Most of the time that is going to be met, but if there's a certain population threshold that's crossed, then we're going to start needing financial contributions to help improve Truxton Park so that it can serve more people or expand what we have there. Is there any other slides, Eric, or is that the last one?
This is the last one here.
Okay, so that's kind of the direction we're heading in now. We know the fee in lieu should be based on cost of the land and also the cost of the equipment. So we're working with Public Works to get some estimates for that. We're also looking at the idea of, could a developer partner with someone who owns an existing facility and expand that or improve that somehow to count as that mitigation. And we're also looking at, we want the facilities to be close to the development, but we also want to take into consideration these socially vulnerable sites. So how do we both plan for facilities that improve, will help support the development, but also if there's money, can we use the money to go towards facilities that are in need of upkeep or more equipment, new equipment? Because we all know all of our parks in the city are not the same. There's some that are in much better condition than others. So that's kind of what we're working through with the work group right now. So I wanted to make sure you all thought we were headed in the right direction and we could start proposing some fee in lieu money for fiscal year 22.
No, that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, Dr. Nash, I think this sounds very appealing. Obviously, we'd like to get the slides and some of the detail, but I think this is really very encouraging. So I want to compliment you on it and let me know how I can help.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, ditto to that.
Alderman Finlayson has a hand up.
Yes, ditto. Dr. Nash, does this mean that any new development that's being proposed would one have to have or install a tot lot or mini lot and have access or create the availability of the, what was the next size up
Neighborhood
lot?
Playground.
The neighbor, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we had a lot of concerns that were raised, especially in the Clay Street community, for example, because of the development that took place there and no or very minimal recreational amenities there. So would this change, which I like, but would it be mandatory that there be a recreational amenity of one of those levels within?
Right. So Eric, can you go back to the first map? So if there was no mini park within a quarter mile, so if they fall outside one of those yellow circles, then yes, no matter what, they have to provide a mini park.
And if there's one of those, if there's one of those yellow circles in close proximity, they could make use of it instead of developing their own.
If they're outside a yellow circle, they have to put in a mini park.
Okay.
So this is for projects with 10 or more residential units.
And you know, the quarter mile radius that the yellow dotted lines are showing, I mean, that's essentially like a walk radius. You know, that's kind of the standard for a 10-minute walk from where you live.
So if they're outside the circle for the neighborhood playground, they could pay a fee in lieu to either improve an existing facility or they could build the, you know, we'd much probably rather than build the facility, but you know, there's not that much land in the city. So it might be more in their interest to improve an existing facility. But the mini park, we wouldn't take a fee in lieu if they can't meet the standard, which is being within a quarter mile of it.
And did I understand you to say that the fee in lieu would be comparable to what it would cost to develop it?
Right. We're still working on those numbers, but you know, the cost of building a mini park, it's not cheap. A neighborhood playground is not cheap, but the city can't really do it with $250 per unit, which is what we charge now. So it would definitely put us in a better position if we have realistic numbers about what it costs to build, to obtain and build a park.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Gay. And then I think we have to give the studio back in a few minutes, everybody, so that they can set up and have a time to do that. Alderman Gay?
Thanks. So Sally, or whomever, so would, because you have to be specific in the code, would you then also include, because you mentioned the lack of space that we have, rooftop green facilities? For example, if you visit cities like Washington, D.C. or New York, if you build a development, instead of having to put the trees and everything and on the minimal land that you have, you could have it on the roof, and the residents would be able to enjoy that as an amenity. Is that something that you would be interested in putting into this code? Or
sure, I think we should embrace creativity as long as it's open dawn to dusk to the public. You know, I think we should be willing to be flexible.
Yeah, that would be really cool. And I think also just like, because he said this is the last question, I may have missed the business development portion of this. So are you sending this out, or is this private?
The presentation?
Yeah, this that we see here.
Everything is public. We're going to email you the presentation and we'll post it online. And all of this park information and more is posted on the Planning and Zoning's page. If you go to Getting Started and then Adequate Public Facilities, I have a whole page about equitable public facilities and working on the Recreation and Parks chapter. And Archie and Marissa have been working with me and have been very helpful providing information for us. And you, Alderman Gay, and Alderwoman Pindell-Charles have come to several of our meetings. So thank you for that.
Is one coming up next week, or I think you just sent the email, right?
We just had one on last Friday.
Oh, okay, I thought it was this Friday.
All right, to close us out, Alderman Arnett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before you sick Alderman Payon on us, I want to return to the comp plan presentation and really offer my profound thanks to Eric and Sally. I thought the quizzes were great. I really appreciated the survey input. And, this is really what I was looking forward to for this work session. And I hope we can have several more. I think we have work to do, but boy, oh boy, thank you very much for this session. It was very
Thank you all so much for your input. I really love hearing your ideas. I love the ideas of looking at history more and the history of our history. And I'd love to incorporate that some more. And we will definitely be back when we have some more goals and some more details to delve into.
Exactly.
Okay. And
thank you all so much.
This was good.
Excellent work. Very thoughtful. It seems like you put a lot into it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Okay. Alderman Payon has said nothing. Yeah. So Alderman Payon, what can I?
Well,
have the floor.
I'll say something now. I move that we adjourn. And by the way, I thought it was great also.
Mike, that sweater is gorgeous.
Look at
I like that one.
Nice.
Thank you, sir.
Pretty sharp there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All those in favor say aye with a show of hands. Aye.
Bye.
I would.
Everybody.
Be safe.
Night.